An Air India plane that was headed for London crashed Thursday, killing more than 200 people on board and shocking the world. One passenger reportedly miraculously survived, and at least one other is expressing gratitude for having missed the flight due to traffic. I'm joined by CBN's Nair to break down this story and the theological questions that emerge from it. Raj, what was your initial reaction to seeing that horrifying footage?
Well, first off, I'm half Indian. So I basically checked with all my family and all our group texts, like, hey, do we know anyone on this flight? Because here's the thing, flights in Asia, let's just call it that, or in the developing world, when it's like a little puddle jumper, you can be like, okay, I don't like it, but I maybe understand if there's like this little, prop plane that, doesn't make it somewhere in Indonesia. This was a Boeing Dreamliner, a 787. This was top of the line. And I think I looked online. This is the first time, again, to my knowledge, that one of those has ever crashed. I mean, this is the safest plane you could possibly imagine. So this was a shock in a lot of ways. But Air India said that there were 169 Indians, 53 Britons, 7 Portuguese, and 1 Canadian on the flight. And then the part of the plane fell on a dining facility of a medical college, killing another 5 medical students. This was, again, not a puddle jumper going from here to there. This was a Boeing 787 Dreamliner flying to London. This is the last plane that you'd expect to go down.
One of the things about this that is so shocking, some of those details you were just sharing, Raj, you look at this and you think, I'm starting my day out, I assume everything is going to be normal, and you have 5 people on the ground killed, just living their lives. You have people on the plane. People never assume something like this is going to happen. And one of the other shocking details is this lone survivor who reportedly walked away from this crash. This individual is said to have had no life-threatening injuries. They had injuries all over their body, but nothing life-threatening. One of the doctors told the Associated Press that he seems to be completely out of danger. When you heard that there was reportedly a survivor to this, what were you thinking?
Well, this is the plot to the movie Unbreakable, the M. Night Shyamalan movie with Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson. This is literally the plot. This is almost hard to believe, especially if you've seen the plane's firebomb when it landed and exploded. I don't know how anyone could have possibly survived that. It is miraculous if this is true. I think his middle name is Kumar, which is my middle name. So if this actually happened, there's a lot of questions. How could someone possibly, it looks like a nuke went off, survive this? It's crazy.
Well, it raises these theological questions, and that's one of the reasons we're talking about this today, right? Because you have this sole survivor who walks away from this. Even if you didn't have that, we'll talk in a moment about somebody else who didn't, the people who didn't make it on the plane that day, and we'll get into that. But you think to yourself, why this person surviving and the others not? Why did this event happen, right? These are the questions of life when difficult things happen and we're sort of forced to grapple with them. Life is moving and moving and moving, and we're living and we're not thinking about death. And then something like this happens and it forces us to think about the fragility of life, how things can change in a moment. And for me, that was the first thing I thought. I thought, all these people thinking they're just going to London, they're going to England, that they're going to land and they're going to carry on with their work and their lives, and hundreds of people never making it to do that. It forces you to think about your own mortality, does it not?
I heard this quote recently, and it said, and I think it's important for us to just marinate on this idea for a second. It says this, cemeteries are full of people who thought they had more time. Oof. And I think that's such a powerful concept because we are so insulated from, the normal human experience over the millennia, where there's, the Black Plague and people dying of war all the time, and there's famine. We're so comfortable, we're so isolated that we almost think that death is just never going to happen. And if it does, it'll happen when I'm like 90 and I die of Alzheimer's, but maybe not. And I think it's important for us to be cognizant of our own mortality. But to your point, Billy, the point that this raises to me is, why evil? Why suffering? The big philosophical questions. Why would God allow this to happen? And I think that's probably one of the biggest debates, one of the biggest questions that a theist can ask, and specifically, obviously, you and I are Christians. And I think one of my favorite apologists John Lennox was on a podcast, I guess you could say it, with Alex O'Connor, one of the world's most famous atheists, kind of turned agnostic, basically dealing with this problem of evil, of this problem of suffering. And he answered it in such an eloquent way. I want to show this 2-minute clip and really pay attention to what he says, because I think it's beautiful. Take a look.
What faces everybody is a mixed picture. I call it beauty and bombs. In other words, we look at the world, we see some beautiful things, and we see some horrible things, especially these days. And any worldview has got to take that into account. That is a fact. And we can argue as long as we like about the theoretical side, if God is good and all-powerful, why this and why that, why the other? And we never come to a satisfactory answer. So I propose another question, equally difficult, but I think it gets us a bit further. Granted that it's like that, is there any evidence anywhere that there is a God who understands it, and to such an extent that I can feel, not that I've got an answer, but that I can see there's a possibility of coming to some peace about it? And my answer to that is that, yes, I think there is. And it's the fact that the God presented in the Christian Gospels is a God who in that sense has suffered, because the central claim of Christianity is that God became human and that Christ is God. So, crudely put, what is God doing on a cross? Well, one thing it certainly shows me is that God has not remained distant from human suffering, but has become part of it.
Because here's the thing. Our God, uniquely amongst worldviews, answers, or at least enters in to this problem, right? It's not, he's not distant. I was reading, what was it? Somewhere in John, and this verse that's so easily kind of just ran by, where it says, Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down. I'm like, wait a second. God incarnate in the flesh was tired. Other places in the gospel, he wept. His friends abandoned him. He was tortured. And so to me, we have a God that doesn't say he'll take us out of the pain and out of the suffering, but he says that, Emmanuel, I am with you in it. I will never leave you in it. And even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil because you are with me. That is utterly unique about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so to all the other worldviews, in my opinion, from atheism to Islam, they're just empty-handed. Buddhism is a Hinduism. None of these worldviews really give me a sufficient answer to the question. And I think Yeshua, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of the Bible, to me has the most satisfactory answer to that question, which is, how can there be? I don't know, but I'm here with you in it. So, Billy, I'll give you the last word, my friend.
Yeah, I think taking away from this, the reality that life is short, we need to be ready. Everything you just said is so pertinent and true. And, you think about this soul survivor, there's another individual, she talked about the fact that, and I'm sure she was very frustrated. She was stuck in traffic, trying to get to the airport, couldn't get there. And, you're trying to get to your flight. I've had this happen to me before. And now she's incredibly grateful that she didn't make that flight, right? You never know what's going to happen in life. And look, there's going to be pain. There's going to be suffering. I've spent a lot of time looking at miracles in the last few months, and not everybody gets to a miracle on this side of eternity, but we have to have a radical trust in God, no matter what happens, that he has a plan. We live in a sick and a fallen and a broken world, and events like this are going to happen. And these events should bring us closer to our faith, closer to that reliance and that trust in God when we see them and when we're thinking about our mortality reality and what really matters, and being right with God all the time, always being ready, since we never know where life will take us. All right, Raj, thanks for breaking it all down with me today. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. God bless.